All right, it is 4 o'clock and we are going to get started with part one of our course, How to Turn Your Board into a Fundraising Machine. Joining us to present this course is Joe Gerecht from Joe Gerecht Fundraising. He's been in the field for 20 years, helping nonprofits engage their boards, as well as help them develop their fundraising strategy for their organization. So we're really excited to have him here today. A little bit before I turn it over to him, we're CauseVox. We help you raise more with less effort. We're a digital fundraising platform that helps you easily raise funds online. So while typical fundraising software is clunky, complex, and contract bound, CauseVox helps you tidy up all your digital fundraising. You can run donation pages, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising, and more in less time with less hassle. So if you're interested in learning more about CauseVox, you can just go over to causevox.com. So my name is Candace. I run Success in Education here at CauseVox, and we'll be diving into a little bit more about what you can expect over the next two classes. So our course overview. So today's class is part one of our How to Turn Your Board into a Fundraising Machine. And so our next class is going to be April 7th at 4 p.m. Eastern. So that is going to be our second part, and you'll be learning more about how to run your successful board giving campaign at that time. So we're looking at a lot of the groundwork and the basics today that Joe will be diving into in just a minute. So as far as what you can expect to take away from this class, you're going to be getting all the PDFs as well as all the PDFs to the slides of this course. We'll also be doing a comprehensive Q&A at the end of our class today and on Tuesday as well. So throughout the class, feel free to chat in any questions that you have, and we'll get to those at the end. Also, there's a Q&A section. Feel free to send in questions there, as well as the chat. We'll be monitoring both closely. So we're recording this, so you and your team can replay this later on. And so you'll get access to those recordings tomorrow and then Wednesday of next week for the next class. Also included is the CauseVox basic plan for free, so you can raise funds for your board fundraising campaign. So if you are interested in taking advantage of that, I'd love to chat more with you about how to get that started. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Joe, who can dive into how to turn your board into a fundraising machine.
All right, thanks, Candace, and thanks everybody for being here. Again, this is Joe Gerecht, and I want to thank you for joining me for How to Turn Your Board into a Fundraising Machine, a two-part class offered in conjunction with our friends at CauseVox. I'm very excited to present this class to you because I know that one of the things that fundraisers and nonprofit staff struggle with most is how to get their boards to help with fundraising, and how to not only help those boards fundraise better, but also to help them be happy and enthusiastic about raising money. Boards matter as part of the fundraising process. You can't rely, obviously, 100% on your board to raise money for you. You shouldn't even be relying on your board for 50% or 30% of your fundraising. But your board can and should be providing significant help to you, particularly with your major donor fundraising efforts. In fact, your board should be among the leaders of your fundraising endeavors. During this class, you're going to learn how to get your board fired up about fundraising on your behalf. And remember, your board, as I said, is particularly important to your major donor fundraising system. Your board members are likely involved with businesses and organizations where they regularly come in contact with people who have the capacity to give to your nonprofit at a higher level. As you probably already know, one of the best ways to build relationships with new major donors quickly and effectively is for someone who already knows your nonprofit to introduce you to them. Your board can and should fill this role. Your board members should regularly be introducing your development team to new prospective major donors. So we're going to talk about how to build a culture of philanthropy on your board over the next two classes that will make your board members enthusiastic about helping you with fundraising. This is a really important point. If you don't proactively build a culture on your board where fundraising is valued and seen in a positive light, your board members won't be willing to help you raise money the way they should. That's what we mean when we say it's important to build a culture of philanthropy on your board of directors. Now, Candace already told you a little bit about me. I will tell you that I have been where you are today. I've served as a development director, as an executive director, as a board member, and as a fundraising consultant to hundreds of nonprofit organizations. So I know how it is working with boards. I know that there are tons of wonderful board members out there, and there are lots of board members who desperately want to help fundraise, but simply don't know how. I also know that there are board members who don't want to touch fundraising with a 30-foot pole. And we're going to talk about all of that during this class. And I know we're in a very unique time, right, in nonprofit fundraising right now, given the quarantines that are going on, given that most people in many places are working from home. And we can talk a little bit about that. And I certainly want to encourage you, if you have questions about specific things that we're talking about and how they would be modified during this unique time, to ask them during our Q&A at the end. I will tell you that most of what we're talking about, nearly all of it, is evergreen, meaning this is not the time to take your foot off the pedal. This is the stuff that we're talking about here is stuff that applies now just as much as it did a year ago and just as much as it will a year from now. All right, so here's the plan for this class. First, today we're going to talk about the proper role of a nonprofit board when it comes to fundraising. Then we'll take a look at 3 strategies for helping your board overcome its fear of raising money. After that, we'll look at 8 different and very specific ways your board can participate in the fundraising process. And then finally, for today, we'll talk about how you can make it easy for your board to fundraise and how to get them excited about the process. Plus, we'll have some time for questions. Now, as I noted earlier, it's a 2-part class, and on our next class next week, we'll talk about some other key concepts, including how to run a successful board giving campaign for your nonprofit, and also how to find strong new board members who for your nonprofit who want to help you fundraise the way that you need them to help you fundraise. So I hope that sounds good. So let's get started. Let's dig in. The first thing I want to talk about is what is the proper role of your board when it comes to fundraising. In working with hundreds of nonprofit boards, I've seen a big difference between what most people think the board of directors of a nonprofit is when it comes to fundraising and what they really are. And it's vitally important to understand this difference. Now, what do most people think a nonprofit board is or should be? Most people think a nonprofit board are a bunch of movers and shakers who join a board because they want to raise money for a nonprofit, and they're really, really good at it. They think that most board members have a ton of connections and know lots of CEOs and philanthropists who are just ready to give. And most people think that board members know how to raise money and like raising money. But that's not true. If you've been working with boards for any length of time, you probably know what boards really are. Boards really are a group of people who are very, very committed to your cause and to your organization, and they're committed to working on that cause, but they don't really know how to raise money. Many of these people aren't even really aware that they are supposed to be raising money. And they're also a group of people who often are not sure how many people they know. They may have strong personal and business relationships and networks, but they aren't used to or comfortable with asking for money, and so they're not sure what they have and what kind of a network they have. Yet so many nonprofit fundraisers approach board fundraising as if they have boards full of movers and shakers who know how to raise money, even when that's not the case. These fundraisers and nonprofit managers get annoyed and frustrated with their boards because they feel like the board isn't raising enough money. Sometimes board members get frustrated with their own boards and with themselves for the same reason. Getting frustrated doesn't help anyone, especially not the nonprofit. Similarly, acting like your board is something that it isn't doesn't help either, and only leads to constant turnover on the board and constant turnover in the fundraising staff, frankly, and constant frustration. Here's the real truth about nonprofit boards. Any nonprofit board, including yours, can be immensely helpful with your fundraising efforts, but only if you approach the situation the right way. Both your staff and your board need to understand each other's roles when it comes to fundraising, and you need to help and support each other along the way. Now, before we talk about the proper role of the board in fundraising, we actually need to talk about the proper role of the staff in fundraising. No matter how large or small your nonprofit is, whether you have no full-time fundraisers on staff or 30 full-time fundraisers on staff, the truth is that it's the staff, not the board, that must manage the fundraising process. The board is composed of volunteers. They don't have the time to focus 100% on your nonprofit. And of the time they do focus on your organization, only a portion can go to fundraising. The rest of that time will be spent on governance, programs, oversight, compliance, reporting, and all the other things that a board has to do. Your staff, on the other hand, works full-time for your nonprofit and has more time and energy to devote to the fundraising program than your board does. Fundraising is not a fly-by-night operation, and it takes more than an hour or two per week to make your fundraising program a success. And for many of your board members, 1 to 2 hours per week is all they have to devote to the fundraising program. Hopefully, your nonprofit has at least one person on staff who works full-time on fundraising. If you're raising more than $500,000 per year at your organization, you should have or be thinking about hiring a full-time fundraiser. If you have a full-time fundraiser, that person should be responsible for the day-to-day fundraising activities, as well as for developing an overall fundraising strategy, of course, in consultation with the board. If you don't have a full-time fundraiser on staff, the person who handles your fundraising on staff, who is often the executive director, should be responsible for the day-to-day fundraising tactics, as well as for developing that overall fundraising plan and strategy, again, in consultation with the board. All of that to say, someone on your staff should have the primary responsibility for fundraising. This includes not only setting fundraising strategy and implementing tactics, but reading up on fundraising strategy, ideas, and new ideas, attending trainings, and thinking about the future of your fundraising program. It's my belief that the rest of your staff has a critical role to play in fundraising as well. Fundraising is one of the most important things you do at your organization. Frankly, I think it's the most important thing that you do at your organization. Everyone on your staff needs to be engaged in fundraising, including your programming staff. Everyone should be on the lookout for new donors. Everyone should be willing to serve as the ambassadors for your organization by attending events and making presentations. And everyone should be willing to help with things like non-ask events and outreach programs. All right, now that we've talked about the proper role of the staff in fundraising, what is the proper role of your board when it comes to fundraising? Or more appropriately, what are the proper roles, plural, of the board in fundraising? Since we said that someone on your staff should have primary responsibility for fundraising, does that mean that your board doesn't have any role in fundraising other than making the occasional ask? Well, not at all. Your board has a vital role in fundraising. In fact, it has not one, but 4 critical roles when it comes to fund development. The success of your board in fulfilling these 4 roles can mean the difference between thriving and merely surviving for your fundraising program. All 4 roles are equally important in your fundraising process. Let's talk about those 4 roles now. The first is that your board should be fundraising visionaries. They should be providing Fundraising leadership. One of the primary roles of your board when it comes to fundraising is as visionaries, providing leadership for your fundraising strategy and your program. I know that we said preferably a fundraising professional on your staff should be responsible for drawing up a detailed fundraising strategy for your nonprofit, and that's true. But the board has a vital role to play in setting the big picture vision for your fundraising program. The board should be charting a path forward by deciding whether your organization will be growing or shrinking or maintaining the status quo in terms of fundraising and in terms of programs and services. These decisions directly impact your fundraising goals. The board should be setting board fundraising goals for the organization in consultation with the staff, as well as making sure that there are firm deadlines for your fundraising strategy. The board should be carefully considering the written fundraising plan. They should be making suggestions, and they should be voting each year to approve the written fundraising plan for the organization so that you can make sure everyone is on the same page. The board should be providing support and encouragement to the fundraising team. This is important and really doesn't happen often enough. And it's one of the leading causes behind development staff turnover is that instead of the board supporting the development staff, they are really placing themselves at odds with the development staff. Ever increasing the goals that the development staff has without increasing the resources that the development staff has to accomplish those goals. When the fundraising program isn't meeting its goals, the board should help figure out why this is happening. Often this happens, as I was just alluding to, because the fundraising program doesn't have the staff or resources that it needs to meet its goals. One of the most important roles of the board as fundraising visionaries is to make sure that the fundraising program is fully resourced, that it has the people, the budget, and other resources that it needs to meet the organization's revenue goals. And above all else, the board should ensure that the entire organization is thinking big about fundraising and setting a bold vision for the future. Anything less, and you'll have trouble appealing to donors and raising the money your organization needs to thrive. So the first role of the board as fundraising visionaries. The second major role of the board when it comes to fundraising is as donors to the organization. You've heard this before, I'm sure, but it's important to remember that your goal as a nonprofit should be to have 100% board giving. Every board member should be donating something to your organization every year. 100% board giving is important for a number of reasons. It sets a good example and shows the staff, volunteers, and other donors that the board is committed to the cause and to fundraising for the cause. It's hard to ask others to get involved with donors if your own board isn't donating. When board giving is less than 100%, it makes donors, including foundations and other institutional givers, wonder whether something might be wrong at the organization that they don't know about. So how much should board members be giving? Well, that depends on your organization and on that particular board member. Some nonprofits like to set specific numbers for how much their board members should be giving each year. Other nonprofits set a number for how much their board members should be giving or raising each year. Both of those methods can work well if done right. However, I'm a proponent of not asking or setting a minimum giving amount for your board members. This is a strategy that I feel reaps bigger and better rewards for your organization, both in terms of board donations and board enthusiasm for fundraising. But it only works if you've instilled a culture of philanthropy on your board. Your board has to understand the importance of fundraising and the importance of 100% board giving in order to have this strategy work. Once those concepts are understood, you can make an appeal to your board, an actual ask to your board to give as much as they can every year to support your work. If your board is invested in your mission and believes in your work and understands the importance of board giving, I've found that you'll raise more money through this method and get more fundraising help from your board than the alternative method of saying that each board member must donate or donate and raise $5,000 per year. Okay, so we've talked about the first two roles of the board in fundraising, as visionaries and as donors. The third and most important role of your nonprofit's board is that each and every one of your board members should be serving as fundraising ambassadors for your organization. Board members may run away when you tell them that you need them to help fundraise, but almost every board member will agree to serve as an ambassador for your nonprofit. What does it mean to be an ambassador for your nonprofit? It means that your board members can help you make connections with people that you don't already know. Your job as a fundraiser is to then cultivate and communicate with these new people that you're introduced to and slowly walk them down the path to becoming more involved with your nonprofit and ultimately becoming a donor. While your board members are certainly welcome to make asks for your organization, serving as a fundraising ambassador does not mean that they have to make asks, and most of your board members will not want to make asks. Instead, it means that through their list of friends, business partners, coworkers, family, vendors, clients, social contacts, etc., they gradually introduce your fundraising team to those people who would be most interested in your nonprofit's mission. There are lots of great ways that your board members can make these introductions. They can invite people to non-ask events or point of entry events. Those are events where you're talking about your nonprofit's mission, but you're not asking for money. You're asking board members to come and to bring 2 or 3 people to hear about your work over cocktails, over coffee, over a tour of your facility. They can be done in your facility. They can be done at a board member's home or office or at a local restaurant. But they're a great way to make it easy for your board members to bring in new donors. Your board members can also set up breakfasts or lunches where the board member attends along with their friend and the executive director or development director of the organization to talk about the organization's mission. Your board members can also invite their friends to participatory fundraising events like walkathons or get people involved as volunteers. I once heard someone describe your board's ambassador role as having the board be boundary spanners for your nonprofit. And I think this is a great way to think about it. Your board members have the potential to introduce you to lots of different social circles and business networks that your team would otherwise not get to meet. They can span boundaries for you. For example, if you have a lawyer on your board, she can introduce you to your town's legal community in a way that you could never accomplish on your own. Likewise, if you have a couple of young professionals on your board, they can help you meet young entrepreneurs in your city that you would never be able to meet otherwise. Your board will not be able to serve as effective ambassadors for your nonprofit if you try to get them to participate in strong arm fundraising. Strong arm fundraising is where you tell your board that they have to go out and raise $5,000 now, or you have to help us meet 3 new people this month. When you give an ultimatum like that, what you're telling your board members is that you want them to go out and call in favors to raise money and set up meetings. This is called strong arming your Rolodex. It can work to generate some quick money, but in the long run, it's a disaster because those people who give because your board members called in favors, well, they'll only give once and they will not become lifelong givers to your nonprofit. And your board members will resent you for forcing them to do these kinds of calls because they know that when that person needs to raise money for an organization, they'll call your board member and strong arm the Rolodex relationship that way. You're not looking for emergency one-off fundraising from your board, hopefully, at least not on a consistent basis. You're looking for long-term relationship building. Your board can be a huge help in expanding your donor network and building new lifelong donor relationships for your organization if you give them the tools, training, and motivation to do it the right way. All right, the fourth and final role for your board in terms of fundraising is to play a supporting role in your fundraising efforts. Board members often enjoy this role the most, and it allows them the chance to make a real impact on your organization's fundraising without the pressure of making introductions or asks. Your board members can serve as a great support for your fundraising team in lots of different ways. They can go along on fundraising meetings if it's appropriate, including cultivation and ask meetings, to tell their story, to lend support, and to make a deeper connection for the nonprofit. For example, a fundraiser going to see a lawyer who they are cultivating takes along a lawyer on the board for the lunch meeting because it makes a deeper peer-to-peer connection. Your board members can make thank you calls to donors after they receive a gift. Start with large donors and move down to mid-level donors. We know from things like Penelope Burke and donor-centered fundraising that when donors receive a thank you call quickly after you receive their gift, they'll give more on average lifetime, even though you're just giving them a short thank you call after every gift is received. Your board members can attend non-ask events and point of entry events to shake hands and build relationships. Remember that the goal of all fundraising activities is relationship building. Your board members can be a great help in building relationships with your donors, and it's something that most board members actually enjoy doing. There are lots of different ways board members can play a supporting role in your fundraising operations. All right, so let's just summarize the four fundraising roles of your board. The board should be fundraising visionaries. They should be donors. They should be fundraising ambassadors. That's perhaps the most important. And they should serve as fundraising support. The best way to ensure that your organization maximizes the fundraising effectiveness of your board is to make sure that both your staff and your board understands the proper roles of the board when it comes to fundraising, and that your team offers your board everything it needs to be successful in its fundraising efforts. Okay, one of the biggest problems you'll face in getting your board enthusiastic about fundraising is that they're afraid of raising money. They've never done it before, or they haven't done it that often, or they don't think they're good at it, and they're pretty sure they don't know anyone with any money, and they just feel icky about the whole thing. So I want to talk about 3 strategies you can use to overcome the 3 main mental obstacles your board members have that are blocking them from being amazing fundraisers. Strategy number 1 is to teach your board that fundraising isn't shady or beneath them. You'd be surprised how many new board members, and even old seasoned board members, come into every discussion about fundraising with a set of preconceived notions and uneasy feelings about the whole thing. There's something in modern culture that makes lots of people feel wary of raising money. You need to believe that fundraising is a good thing, not a necessary evil, and you need to get your board to believe it as well. Remember, teach your board that fundraising isn't evil, isn't bad, that people who fundraise aren't slimy or smarmy or shady, that people aren't going to think less of them for fundraising. And of course, that organizations that fundraise aren't only concerned with turning a quick buck. It's necessary to dispel these myths because many people have become cynical about fundraising. Many people see fundraising campaign ads on TV or online. They get direct mail letters at their homes and workplaces. They get asked to buy tickets to events and participate in walkathons, and they get jaded and cynical. The truth is, fundraising enables hundreds of thousands of organizations, millions of organizations around the world to serve literally billions of people. Fundraising lets homeless shelters stay open, it funds cancer research, it keeps schools, churches, hospitals, and jobs programs afloat, and makes life better for billions of people on the earth. And you need to build a culture on your board where your board members feel that way too. You need to remind them that fundraising enables your organization to do what you do. So if your nonprofit matters and if your programs matter, your fundraising matters, both to the community at large and the people you serve. You've got to believe this in your very core and then get your board to believe it as well. Your board should know that when they are fundraising, they aren't hitting people up for money or trying to con anyone. They're simply asking people to partner with your organization, invest in your work, and change the world, or at least your corner of the world. Strategy number 2 is to show your board that your organization is doing great work and needs more money now to do even more good. This is another strategy that might seem hard to believe. If people are on your board, how could they not know that your organization is doing good and needs more money right now to do even more good in the world? The sad truth is that many board members become complacent. They join a board, they hear how well the event last month went, or that the annual campaign raised 2.5% more this year than last year, and they figure, hey, we're doing okay. Then they focus on the PR committee or working on programs or getting more volunteers, and they don't put any major effort into raising money, except when they have to. You need to make it clear to your board that you need to raise more money now, and you need to show your board why you need the money. I like to start every board meeting with something mission related. Maybe it's a client we helped that comes and sits for the first 20 minutes of the board meeting and talks about what the organization has done for him or her. Or perhaps it's a short video we shot at the soup kitchen that we operate. Perhaps it's reading some letters from kids we gave scholarships to, or hearing from a program officer about a family home that was saved through our efforts. Whatever it is, I like to make sure that every board member hears about our mission and our work at the very beginning of every board meeting. This helps your board members put a face to your work and understand how important your mission is. Board members should also understand why you need the money now as opposed to later or next year. You can easily accomplish this by showing that the need exists. In our soup kitchen example, you can make sure that the board members know that there are 578 people in your town who qualify for assistance, but whom you can't help because you don't have the money in place to do so. This adds urgency to your fundraising efforts and helps place the board's focus on fundraising by underlining the fact that without raising more money, you can't help everyone in need. Every nonprofit can utilize this strategy, no matter your mission, no matter your case for support, and no matter what your fundraising needs are. Strategy number 3 is to let your board know that there are lots of different ways they can help with raising money, and that you will work with them to make sure that there are opportunities for them to help with development in ways that make them feel comfortable. Remember, your board members are not professional fundraisers. One of the most intimidating things you can tell a new board member is that you need them to go out and raise $10,000 this month, and they should come back and give you an update in 3 weeks. That will send your board members running for the hills. Instead, tell your board members there are lots of ways that they can help you fundraise. Some of them involve selling tickets and making asks, and others are as simple as inviting people to fun free events. The important thing is to make sure that your board members know that not all fundraising is making asks. You should also plant the idea in your board's head that the fundraising staff is the board's partner, not their taskmaster. While most board members see themselves as the governing body of the organization when it comes to programs and facilities and communications, many board members feel deep down that the fundraising staff, and particularly the development director or the vice president of development, is their mean boss when it comes to fundraising. That the fundraising staff shows up at board meetings to beat the board over the head about fundraising, always telling the board they aren't doing enough and here's what they need to be doing this month. If this is what you're doing at your nonprofit, I want to suggest that you stop now. It doesn't work and it shouldn't. The board needs to feel comfortable raising money, and they need your staff as a partner in these efforts. Offer to work with your board members to tailor individual opportunities for them to help you raise money. Serve as a resource for their questions and ideas. Send your development director out to have breakfast or lunch one-on-one with each board member every year. Talk about things other than fundraising. Build a relationship with your board members. Just because they're on your board doesn't mean you don't have to cultivate and steward them. Do it just like you would with other major donors. Put your board at ease and let them know that you've got lots of fundraising opportunities coming up and would love their help on some of them, and are also open to their fundraising ideas. Partner with your board. Don't browbeat them. All right. So we said to make sure that the board understands there's lots of ways that they can help fundraise. Let's talk about 8 different ways your board can help you fundraise each year. When you tell your board members that you need help with fundraising, many of them automatically think that you're telling them they need to go out and ask their friends and colleagues for money. And while that certainly wouldn't hurt, it's important to note that not every board member will feel comfortable doing that. That's okay. There are lots of ways that your board members can help your fundraising efforts. Remember, fundraising is all about building relationships. Think through the different ways your board members can not only raise more money directly, but can also help your organization build relationships with new donors. So here are 8 different ways your board can participate in the fundraising process. And this is only scratching the surface. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds of ways your board can help. Let's start with non-ask events. We've talked about them already, but these are my favorite way to get your board members engaged in development. And they're one of the most successful, yet least understood and least utilized ways to find new fundraising prospects. Non-ask is an event. A non-ask event is an event held by your nonprofit that targets donors and prospects, but does not include any fundraising ask or cost of admission for attendees. The goal of a non-ask event is to move donors closer to your organization and eventually towards even larger gifts and involvement. And it also is to move prospects towards making their first gift. Some consultants and books you may read call these point of entry events or cultivation events. I call them non-ask events. Non-ask events are an opportunity to tell attendees about your mission, to introduce them to your staff, and make them feel like part of your team. While these types of events can take many forms, generally they involve a tour of your office or facility, if appropriate, with time for socializing and a short program. Or they can be held at a local restaurant or someone else's office, where attendees hear about your mission over cocktails or coffee and dessert. As part of these events, you'll want to give your guests time to eat, time to drink, and time to mingle. Then put on a short program that introduces your mission, what you do, and how you do it. You'll want to come at it from an emotional angle. Why is your mission important? What are the outcomes of your work? Introduce your staff, give attendees some time to ask questions, and send them home with some literature. Let them know that someone from your team will be following up with them. This is very important to see if they have any further questions. The fortune with these is in the follow-up. Then you send them home. The most successful non-ask events are short, and the program and speeches don't drag on. Aim to have attendees in and out in 60 to 90 minutes with only 10 to 20 minutes of talking. If you're doing a tour, try to have 10 to 20 minutes of talking and a 10 to 20 minute tour and the rest of the time for socializing. One big reason that non-ask events are successful is that you set expectations for your guests that are not intimidating. Make sure they know before you come that you want to show off your work and talk about your mission, but that there will be no fundraising at the event. This is key. Prospects will feel much more comfortable coming if they know that there will be no asks at the event, just a chance to hear more about the organization. So where does the board come in? Well, simple. Use non-ask events as an easy way for your board members to introduce the organization to their friends, colleagues, business partners, and social network. For every non-ask event you hold, ask for 2 or 3 board members to take responsibility for getting 2 or 3 or 4 people on their own network to the event to introduce them to your nonprofit. This is usually an easy task for you to make to your board members and ask for you to make to your board members. Once you tell them that you won't be asking their friends for money at the event and that the event will simply be a chance to introduce the organization to their friends, and then you'll follow up with them later. To make this model a success, many organizations hold between 2 and 4 such events per year to make sure that there's always one just around the corner. Remember, for non-ask events, the fortune is in the follow-up. The event is a starting point. You'll tell people at the event that you'll be following up with them to see if they have any additional questions, and after the event, you should do so. Someone from your development staff, someone who was introduced at the event, should call every attendee and follow up. You should ask questions like, what did you think about the presentation and about our organization? Do you have any suggestions on how we could be doing things better? Do you have any other questions? Your job is to get the person engaged with and involved with your organization's activities and to cultivate them leading up to an eventual ask. The non-ask event provided a nice entry point for your board to make an introduction. Now it's up to your staff to build and maintain a relationship with this new prospect. Another way that your board members can help is by making introductions and referrals outside of the non-ask event. Your board members each have a network. They may not realize it, but they do. They have friends, coworkers, business partners, clients, vendors, accountants, lawyers, fathers-in-laws, nieces, classmates from college, etc. Imagine how helpful it would be for your nonprofit if your board members made introductions and referrals to this network for your organization. So you could introduce these folks to your mission, cultivate them, and eventually ask them for money. And then get these new donors to open their networks and make referrals as well. The single best place to find new major donor prospects is inside your current major donors and board members' Rolodexes. Good salespeople in the for-profit world are constantly asking their current customers and others in their network for referrals. These are introductions to people that also might want to buy the product or service the salesman is selling. You'd be surprised at just how often current customers will refer new customers to their salesperson. In fact, in many businesses, such as real estate and insurance, referrals can make up a majority of a salesperson's new business each year. Of course, when great salespeople ask for referrals, they aren't asking just for a name. They want their current client to introduce them to their friends and colleagues by way of a meeting, a call, or at least an email. This type of introduction reinforces to the new prospects that the salesperson is trustworthy and has a great product that might be helpful. When was the last time you talked with your board members to ask them for referrals? And I want to tell you that asking for names in the middle of a board meeting, saying we need new names for our list, or an event host committee meeting, that doesn't count. What I mean is, how many of your board members have you sat down with one-on-one as part of a cultivation meeting and directly asked, can you introduce me to 2 or 3 of your colleagues who might be interested in learning more about our work? Try it. It works. Another great way that your board members can help you fundraise is by selling tickets to your fundraising events or holding a small fundraising event in their home or office and inviting their friends and neighbors to come. This can be a great and fun way for your board members to help you raise money. Another way that your board members can help with fundraising without ever asking anyone for money is that they can build relationships with current donors and help strengthen the bonds between your organization and its donors. Your fundraising team is likely already in regular contact with your largest donors, but you probably don't have the time or resources to have one-on-one meetings or phone calls with your mid-level donors. What if you had a handful of trusted board members who took over this responsibility for you? What if a couple of your board members called each new mid-level donor to thank them for their gift? What if they were even able to invite some of them out to lunch? What if your board chair and vice chair called all of your major donors and invited them out for a round of golf? What if your board simply worked the phones along with your staff and called every one of your current donors in a thankathon to say thank you? For most mid-level and low-level donors, getting a call from a board member at an organization they support is a big deal. It shows them that the nonprofit cherishes their gift and sees them as an important part of the organization. Put yourself in your donor's shoes. Imagine sending a $200 donation to an organization that raises $1 million per year and getting a call the next week from a board member to thank you for your donation and invite you to the next non-ask event the organization is holding. Even if you don't go to the event, wouldn't that call have a positive impact on you and encourage you to give again in the future? How can you utilize your board members to help you deepen your organization's relationships with donors and prospects? Another super easy way for your board members to support your fundraising efforts is by sending out letters and emails to their friends and contacts on behalf of your organization. These letters and emails can be ask letters, sure, meaning that they are asking for money or asking for people to pay for an event, a ticket for an event, or for your annual campaign, or any other reason. Or they can be non-ask communication, simply introducing your nonprofit to their friend or their company that they do business with and preparing them for a later meeting, call, or other introduction. While this is a quick and easy way for board members to get involved, it's also one of the least effective ways they can help with your fundraising efforts, as opposed to making calls or doing meetings. Making calls and doing meetings are far more effective than simply them sending out a letter or email. So for this reason, don't let your board off the hook by making sending out letters and emails the only way a board member participates. This should be just one of the many things your board members do to help you raise money. Also, remember that it's far better for your board members to take some sample text you create and personalize it. You give them a template and print it on their own letterhead or put it in their own email and send it out with a little personal note than it is for them to simply give you names and contact information and you send out the letter, which isn't very effective at all, at least not in my experience. You want them to send it out on their own letterhead. Another way that your board members can help you is by inviting you to speak or to come to a networking event. Many companies and social clubs, country clubs, churches and synagogues, families and service clubs have regular meetings and can use a great speaker from a local nonprofit to talk about the problems facing the local community. Likewise, many of these same groups hold networking events for their members and their friends to meet and greet in a social setting. Wouldn't it be helpful for your group to get in front of a meeting of potential donors and introduce them to your organization? Likewise, wouldn't you like to be in a room full of businessmen and businesswomen at a networking event, getting introduced by your board member who knows everyone in the room? Most board members don't realize that you want to be invited to these kinds of events and speaking opportunities. You have to let them know, yes, I'd love to be invited to these types of events. Tell your board members that you would love to accompany them to these meetings and to speak to the groups they're involved with. You don't want to simply get a ticket and attend alone. You want your board members to show you around the meeting and introduce you to people. Most board members I've talked to about this type of speaking and networking jump at the opportunity to show off the organizations that they're working with. You never know unless you ask. Another great way your board members can help is by finding corporate sponsors. Many times, board members have connections with more businesses than they realize. They work at or own companies that buy from vendors and sell to clients. They have personal and corporate attorneys and accountants. They frequent local and regional businesses, and they spend money on various household and luxury items. Most board members don't know that if they spend $5,000 per year getting their corporate taxes done, their accountant would be glad to spend $100 or $250 on a sponsorship for their favorite charity if the accountant is asked. Likewise, many board members don't realize that if their business is buying $100,000 worth of goods from a vendor each year, the vendor won't bat an eye at giving $1,000 or $2,000 to a charity event on behalf of the board member. Most vendors would simply consider it a marketing expenditure or the cost of doing business. Talk to your board members and find out who they know, what companies they do business with or sell to, and what companies they patronize. Then, talk to your board about going out to these businesses that they have a relationship with to ask for a corporate sponsorship for your next event, your annual campaign, your capital campaign, or other fundraising opportunity. Show them how easy it is to ask for corporate money and equip them to do so. Another great way your board members can help is by being a captain for participatory fundraising events. Participatory fundraising events are easy and fun ways for your board to ask for money and to bring new people into your organization's orbit. Participatory fundraising is, the strategy of using dozens or hundreds or thousands of people, involving them in a single event or campaign to raise money for your organization. That's things like walkathons and collecting change and to a certain degree, things like crowdfunding campaigns online, or inviting people to restaurant weeks where a number of eateries all donate 10% of profits to a charity. Participatory fundraising is an easy ask for your board members because it is a fun and inexpensive way to ask other people for money for your nonprofit. Consider holding a walkathon or participatory fundraising event and asking your board members or several of them, all of them or several of them, to serve as captains for the event. This means putting together a team of walkers or dancers or change collectors who each try to reach a common fundraising goal. Remember, don't approach your participatory fundraising efforts willy-nilly. Set up a real program that you want people or companies to be involved with. Create a list of benefits that participants will receive and recognition or awards that you'll offer. Professionally designed marketing materials and a small booklet that tells interested prospects how to participate, where the walkathon will be, how to run their own small event, etc. The best participatory fundraising efforts are run as professionally as possible. Board members can be a huge help in setting up these efforts and raising money for them successfully. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to talk about how to make it easy for your board to fundraise for you. To really get your board enthusiastic about fundraising, you need to make it easy for them to fundraise on your behalf. In my mind, there are three key things you can provide or you need to provide to your board in order to get them fired up about fundraising. The first, you need to provide them with lots of opportunities to help out with fundraising in lots of different ways. These opportunities can include non-ask events, paid fundraising events, participatory fundraising events like walkathons, opportunities to make personal introductions and referrals, chances to invite their friends to volunteer alongside them, ways to build relationships with current donors, as well as a real chance to have their opinion and ideas on fundraising be heard by the organization. The more varied fundraising opportunities you give your board, the more they'll want to help. Second, you need to provide your board with fundraising training. Your board members may never have sold anything before. They may never have made an ask before, and they might not understand how to help you raise money. You'll need to teach them. Hold a fundraising training session. Show your board how to ask someone to come to a non-ask event. Teach your board members how to call someone up and ask for a sponsorship or a donation. Work with your board in group settings and one-on-one to train them how to be supercharged fundraisers. Some of your board members will really enjoy the process. Some will not, and many will just be grateful to know what to say and when to say it as they try to raise money for you. And lastly, provide your board members with all of the materials they need to effectively fundraise on your behalf. Do your board members have a copy of your case for support? If not, give it to them. Get them brochures and donor reply envelopes. Get them invitations to events. Give them flyers for walkathons, sample scripts to remind them how to make an ask. Anything that you can think of that will help them raise money using the opportunities you've set up for them. Let me tell you, you can do this. This can be done, no matter the state of your board today. I have seen a number of boards that were so weak about fundraising blossom into referral engines and fundraising machines. It won't happen overnight. This is a process that takes time. It helps as you're seeking out new board members to look for those who might be a fundraising spark to your current board. It'll also help to start making it clear at your very next board meeting that all board members are needed and expected to participate in the fundraising process. Then it's up to you, the organization, to work with your board to train them, to provide them with fundraising opportunities, and to earn their trust. It won't happen overnight, but within the next year, you can have a newly energized board that is fired up and ready to fundraise. You can do it, and your board can do it too. All right. I'd be happy now to open up the floor to any questions that you have. And remember, we'll be talking more particularly about the board fundraising campaign, and some other key tactics like how to find good board members that'll help you fundraise in depth in our next class. But if you have other questions about what we talked about today, I want to encourage you to enter them into the chat box, and we'll be back in a second to answer them for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. That was so informative and so helpful. I think you covered so many great points on how to engage your board in fundraising. And so I want to hop into a couple questions that I've seen come in. So Ingrid wrote in how, and this is in the context of when you are doing those non-ask events, how do you communicate to attendees that the event is a non-ask event as opposed to soliciting funds?
Yeah, so first and foremost, you don't use any of the trappings of a fundraising event as you're inviting people to it, right? There's not obviously not a ticket price, but you don't send out an announcement that makes it look like it's a fundraising event of any kind. What I like to do is give it a name, you know, um, you know, uh, for if you're a scholarship fund, maybe call it back to school night, or meet the staff night, or you come up with a name for it. Maybe maybe you can even come up with something fun, um, and you put on that invitation or in the email that it's a chance to learn about your work and for you to get the community's feedback about your work. And it's particularly easy to make it clear that it's not a fundraising event if you're using the captain strategy. If you're getting board members and others, because you don't need to just limit it to board members, but if you get board members and others to serve as captains by inviting some of their friends to the some of their friends to the event, they can very easily let it be known, hey, this isn't a fundraising event. We're trying to raise our community profile, trying to get as many people to hear about us and raise awareness about us. And I'll be there. Would you come have a cocktail or have some hors d'oeuvres, and let's listen to what they have to say and go from there. So you want to lightly make it clear that it's not a fundraising event.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then Ingrid also submitted another great question, which I think is very topical for the moment, where what if your board members are physically distant from one another, and how does that change how you approach them when it comes to fundraising?
Sure. Well, yeah. So the question there is there's a couple different answers depending on what you mean. If your board members are located far away from each other, um, and they're there's not what I assume you mean is if they're located far away from each other, you're not going to be able to do the non-ask events where board members are coming out and bringing people to the non-ask event, and it's going to be harder for the fundraiser to sit down with the board members. I mean, the question is, if you can get out to see your board members, that's the best. Even if if your organization is large enough that you as a fundraiser can fly out and meet your board members once a year, I want to encourage that. And what I want to encourage there is to leverage that trip by going out to see your board member, and then also having your board member at the same time while you're out there, have them host a non-ask event if they're willing to do it at their office or at their home. See if they'll put 5 or 10 people together to hear about your work. See if they'll set up a meeting or 2 or 3 or 4 for you with people, so that it makes sense for you to fly out and see them. I think also what we're learning during this whole shutdown is more can be done through video conference than a lot of people have realized. There are organizations out there that even before this were very successfully hosting virtual events, virtual non-ask events, where people could log in and learn about the organization and ask questions virtually. A lot of times, what those organizations were doing was giving a reason for people to log in live, as opposed to saying, well, you can log in and see a replay or something like that. They really wanted to do a virtual meeting and have people be able to log in live, either to participate one-on-one or to watch it live. So they would do something like, we're going to have a giveaway, or we're going to send t-shirts to everyone who's on the live event, or you're going to get to hear from some special speaker. I've seen that happen as well, where there's someone who's well known in a certain niche, who's connected with the organization and who pops into the meeting and talks for a little bit. But I would say be creative and remember that personal contact with your board members trumps everything in terms of, relationship building. And there's a hierarchy of relationship building with all donors, including board members. Face-to-face is best. Face-to-face is better than phone calls. Phone calls are better than snail mail letters. Snail mail letters are better than emails, generally, in terms of relationship building. But if you can do face-to-face, do it. If not, video chat. If not, phone calls. But try and be in touch with your board members where they're actually hearing your voice several times per year so that you can build the relationship with them that you need in order for them to help you build relationships with their own networks.
Yeah, definitely. And something that I've seen pop up even recently with some of the customers that I've chatted with, a lot of the nonprofits that are trying to navigate relationships with their board, is that they're doing like virtual happy hours where they encourage people to, put together their own little wine and cheese plate and kind of join for a discussion as well. So yeah, I've heard a lot of organizations start doing that. So in these uncertain times, I think that's a great way to just get your board together or, have that, still like an event that's not ask related and more informational. So, yeah. Any more questions before we close out our conversation today? I think I just saw one come in. Give me 1 second. So I'm gonna read the whole thing out loud for context. David just sent in, the board members that we have are not wealthy, and we have traditionally compensated them for their time that they have worked on various projects outside of our board meetings. We are a small organization that raises just over $400,000 per year, and we are 3 years old. This accounts for about $15,000 to $20,000 per year. How do you suggest we move towards 100% board giving? 3 out of 4 board members are close contacts to the founder and executive director. So any insights or guidance that you can have for them would be welcome.
Sure. So, you don't want to go cold turkey, right? If you have something that's been working or has been mostly working, you want to make changes slowly over time. I would say, and again, not knowing anything about your organization other than what Candace just read, um, I would say that in general, if you're raising about $400,000 per year and you have now just just 4 board members, you're on the low side in terms of number of board members if you're growing. If you want your organization to grow beyond that 400,000 that you're raising every year, which is great. It's great that you've gotten there. But you're probably going to want to grow your board anyway at this point. You're probably going to want to start adding board members. I would say that the average, and this is completely unscientific and just based on my experience, the average organization that gets up to $400,000 to $500,000 per year and starts to systemize and professionalize a little bit, probably has 6, 7, 8 board members at that point. So you got some room to grow. And I would suggest thinking through, and we're going to be talking about this in the next class, how to find and recruit good board members. But I think growing the board with people who are more committed or more comfortable with fundraising and have more contacts is really, really great. I would also encourage you, as you start talking with your board about both giving and fundraising, you don't necessarily have to couch it in major gift terms. Your board members don't have to give a ton for you to have 100% board giving. In fact, you could raise $1 from each of your 4 board members and have 100% board giving, and that'd be a start. What I like to do is just ask board members to give at a level which is personally meaningful for them. I actually like to use that phrasing too, because I want to make it clear to them that while we want 100% board giving, we don't want to bankrupt anyone, we don't want to make anyone feel bad, but we do want them to give it an amount that is somewhat, I mean, kind of sometimes faith-based organizations will use the term sacrificial, give at a sacrificial giving level. I want to convey that, but assuming you're not a faith-based organization, convey it in a more secular way. And the way I do that is give it a level that's personally meaningful for them. And I want to make it clear to them also that when we're asking them to help us raise money, we don't necessarily need them to go out and raise $100,000, find a $100,000 donor. You may not even need them to go find you $1,000 donor. Maybe if they could start helping you find $100 donors, that would be great. And you say to when your board members realize that if somebody gives you $8 a month to your organization, they're a $100 donor. Everybody knows $100 donors. Frankly, when somebody gives, $83 a month, they're a $1,000 donor. Well, that means a lot of people, most people know several $1,000 a year donors, because most people, even people who are not wealthy, know people who could afford to give $83 a month, even if not everyone they know could do that, obviously. So I would want to suggest that you start building a culture on your board where board members donate, where board members help you find even smaller donors, where you start adding in some new board members who have more capacity and have bigger networks, and that you go from there. But really starting to explain to your board and get everyone on your board to understand how important fundraising is to what you do, and how really fundraising is everybody's job, because without fundraising, you couldn't do what you're doing. You're raising $400,000 a year, which is great. If you had $500,000 a year, you'd be able to do even more. And then I would encourage you to listen to class number 2 next week, talking about how to bring in new board members and how to specifically run a step-by-step board giving campaign. I think both of those topics are going to be very helpful as you kind of try and navigate your unique situation.
Thank you so much, Joe. All these insights are so valuable and so very practically applicable for a lot of organizations. So I really appreciate all the insights and time today. I think that just wraps it about up for today's discussion. So as a reminder, the next class is on the 7th. So that's Tuesday at 4 p.m. I will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow with the recordings and the access to the slides from today. So you can expect that tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, if you have any more questions that you want us to answer in between now and the next class, feel free to reply to that email that goes out tomorrow, and we'd be happy to either answer those then and there, or put them in the queue for our Q&A after the next class. So please go ahead and mark that on your calendars, and you'll also get the invite for the webinar tomorrow as well. So you'll get that Zoom meeting link. This webinar is presented by CauseVox. So thank you so much for joining the course. And then if you'd like to take advantage of the basic plan for your board fundraising campaign, feel free to reach out to us as well. And CauseVox is a digital fundraising platform that helps you raise more with less effort through donation pages, peer-to-peer fundraising, and crowdfunding campaigns as well. So all great resources to kind of tap into your board for fundraising and driving them towards giving online. So yeah, that's it for our time today. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, Candace. Thanks everybody for being here, and looking forward to talking with you next week.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Awesome. Well, thanks again, and we'll hear from you then. Awesome. Take care, everybody.